Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real quick. Sometimes we get so caught up thinking we don't matter to somebody, we overlook the little things that actually show they're thinking about us way more than we realize. See, everybody thinks love or interest got to be this big dramatic movie scene. You know, fireworks, love letters, rose petals on the floor, some big public confession in the rain. No, most times it's in the small, consistent stuff. That's where the truth lies. Now, I want to give you 4 signs, 4 things to look out for that show you he thinks about you more than you know. Number 1, he remembers the little details. Now, I'm not talking about remembering your birthday. That's survival, not romance. If a man forgets that, he in trouble. I'm talking about the little random things you say in passing. Like one time you mentioned you like your coffee with just 2 sugars, and out of nowhere, weeks later, he shows up with exactly that. Or you told him about this old movie your mama used to love, and suddenly he's suggesting y'all watch it together. That's not coincidence. That's a man who's been storing that information because you live in his head rent-free. Number 2, he checks on you at the most unexpected times. See, a man who doesn't care, he only shows up when it's convenient for him. But a man who's thinking about you, he sends that "did you make it home safe" text. He calls you in the middle of the day, not for no reason other than to hear your voice. Or maybe he remembers you had that big meeting, and out of nowhere you get a message saying, "You got this." That's a man who might be busy, might got a whole lot going on, but in the middle of his storm, you still crossed his mind. Don't ignore that. Number 3, he includes you in his world. Now look, this one right here is big. When a man is always keeping you at a distance, something ain't adding up. But when he's thinking about you, he starts pulling you into his everyday life. He tells you about his crazy coworker. He asks you what he should wear to that dinner. He wants your opinion on things that don't even concern you directly. Why? Because he's already picturing you as a part of his circle. He's not just thinking of you in moments, he's thinking of you as a presence in his future. Number 4, he finds ways to be near you, even when he doesn't have to. This one's easy to miss. But when a man is thinking about you, he don't need an excuse to show up. He'll swing by where you are, he'll join in on plans he normally wouldn't, or he'll just happen to call right when you're free. He's not waiting for the stars to align. He's aligning himself with you. And you can see it in how he rearranges his time, how he makes room in his life. Because let me tell you, nobody rearranges their schedule for somebody they don't think about. See, sometimes you might doubt yourself, wonder if you're really on his mind. But if he remembers the little things, checks in when you least expect it, brings you into his world, and keeps finding ways to be near you, baby, you don't have to wonder. He's thinking about you more than you know. When a man remembers the little details you mention in passing, that is one of the clearest signs that you are on his mind far more often than you think. Think about it for a second. People go through their days hearing thousands of words, conversations, noises, distractions, and most of it gets lost. We forget half the things people tell us at work. We don't remember what we had for lunch 2 days ago. And yet when someone truly matters, their words stick in our minds like glue. So when you notice him bringing up something you said casually, almost like you forgot you even said it, that's not random. That's him paying attention to you because in his mind, you're not just background noise, you're the highlight. It could be as simple as you saying you don't like onions on your burger, and the next time you're out together, he makes sure the order comes exactly the way you like it. He might not announce it. He might not say, "Hey, I remembered you said this," but the action speaks louder. That's thoughtfulness at work, and thoughtfulness doesn't just come out of nowhere. It comes from someone who's been carrying your words with him. It's not about grand gestures. It's about awareness. If you mention one time that you had a favorite childhood candy and weeks later he shows up with it, he's telling you in his own way, "I heard you and I care enough to hold on to that." Most people don't hold on to little details unless they have an emotional connection to the person who said them. That emotional tie makes memory stronger, it makes it sharper, and it makes those details stand out. It shows you that while you may feel like you're just living life, sharing random stories, in his mind, those words are being filed away as important. Think about how many times you've shared something lighthearted, not even expecting anyone to remember, and he comes back to it later. Maybe you said you loved a particular song, and the next time you're in the car together, that song is already queued up. Maybe you told him your dad used to take you fishing when you were younger, and weeks later he asks about those trips like he's been holding onto that picture of you in his imagination. That's not just listening, that's active remembering. And the only reason he's doing that is because you cross his mind even when you're not there. The truth is, Most people think interest is shown only in the obvious things, how often he calls, how often he texts, how many gifts he buys, but the real signs are often subtle, almost invisible unless you pay attention. Remembering the little details is his way of saying, I see you. I value what you say. What matters to you matters to me. It could be something as small as recalling that you had an exam or a tough day at work. He might not have been there physically, but the fact that he brings it up later proves you were part of his mental landscape. And you know what's powerful about this? It's effortless proof. You don't have to ask him, 15, do you think about me? He shows you in the way he remembers. If he recalls what you wore on your first date, if he remembers the name of your best friend after hearing it only once, if he knows your coffee order without asking, those are not accidents. Men don't just file away information like that unless it has meaning. He could have conversations with a dozen people in one day, but it's your voice that sticks with him, your preferences that guide his choices, your stories that he repeats back. That's how you know you're on his mind. Sometimes we underestimate the power of small things. We're waiting for someone to shout their feelings from the rooftops, but in reality, love often whispers in the details. When he recalls that your favorite flower isn't roses but sunflowers, when he remembers you like your popcorn with extra butter, when he knows you hate cold weather, and checks if you're bundled up. That's his heart working quietly. He may not say it outright, but his actions speak a whole language of their own. Even more telling is how consistent he is with it. Anyone can remember one thing once, maybe by accident, maybe because it was obvious, but when he consistently pulls up the little pieces of information you thought were too small to matter, that's intentional. That shows that you're not a fleeting thought in his day. You're a constant presence in his mind. He carries those details because you matter to him. He treasures them because they connect him to you, and every time he brings them back, he's reminding you that you've left an imprint on his memory. So when you see this sign, don't brush it off. Don't think, oh, it's nothing. It's not nothing. It's one of the most powerful indicators that he's thinking about you more than you know. Because if you were just casual, if you were just another face in his day, those little details would have faded away already. The fact that they haven't means he's not just listening to you. He's holding on to you in ways you may not even realize. When a man checks on you at the most unexpected times, that is one of the clearest signs that you're crossing his mind more than you realize. Anybody can check in when it's convenient. Anybody can send a quick good morning text if that's part of their routine. But when it's random, when it comes out of nowhere in the middle of his busy day, that's when you know you've been sitting in the back of his thoughts, nudging him until he reaches out. Picture this. You mentioned earlier that you had a long day ahead, a packed schedule, maybe a big presentation, and then a few hours later, out of the blue, a message pops up that says, how's it going? You doing all right? That's not routine. That's genuine care. That's him pausing in his own world because yours mattered enough to stop and check in. It might not even be about anything big. Sometimes it's the smallest things that tell the biggest truths. Like you're sitting at home, maybe you haven't talked all day, and suddenly he calls just to ask if you've eaten. Or you get a text late at night, not for conversation, not to keep you up, but simply to ask if you made it home safe. Those are little acts that show his mind wandered to you, even when he didn't have to let it. Because the truth is, when someone doesn't care, they don't wonder. They don't sit there in the middle of their own schedule thinking about whether you're okay, whether you need a word of encouragement, whether you need someone to ask about your day. When someone does care, when you are running through their thoughts, they can't help but check in. Sometimes he'll even disguise it, like he'll pretend he's calling about something else or joking around. But really, he just wanted to hear your voice. A lot of men won't come right out and say, I was thinking about you, but their actions give them away. He could be hanging with his friends, working on something, watching a game, and yet there's that little break in the action where his thoughts drift back to you. That's when he'll reach out unexpectedly. And the beauty of it is, he might not even realize how much he's giving away when he does it. Another way this shows up is when he remembers your schedule better than you expected. He knows you had that doctor's appointment, he knows you had that interview, and he makes it a point to check in right before or right after. Not because you reminded him, but because it's stuck in his mind. That's him letting you know without saying it outright. I'm paying attention, and you're important to me. Think about how many people in your life don't do that. People who claim they care but can't remember what you told them yesterday. Now think about the difference it makes when someone not only remembers but actually follows up. That's not just listening. That's caring in action. The unexpected check-ins are also about timing. Anybody can send a good morning text, but it's the good luck text before your meeting that hits different. Anybody can call when they're bored, but it's the call that comes when you're going through something tough that reveals the truth. You might not have even told him you were having a hard day, but he sensed something in your voice before, and hours later, he reaches back out. That's not an accident. That's a sign you've been on his mind enough for him to notice and follow through. It's also important to notice how these check-ins make you feel. If his unexpected call lightens your mood, if his short message reminds you someone is thinking about you, that's intentional, whether he admits it or not. Because let's be honest, most people don't interrupt their own lives to make sure you're good unless you matter to them. He could keep living his day without sending that text. He could let the thought pass by without taking action, but the fact that he doesn't, that's what makes it meaningful. He's not just thinking about you, he's acting on those thoughts, and that's what makes all the difference. Sometimes those little just checking in moments can tell you more about where you stand with a man than anything else. He may not always articulate his feelings, he may not be overly expressive, but if you're the one who crosses his mind in the middle of the day enough for him to stop what he's doing, that tells you everything you need to know. Because at the end of the day, people make time for what they care about. If he's making time for you, not when it's scheduled, not when it's expected, but when it's random and genuine, that's proof he's thinking about you far more than he lets on. And sometimes those check-ins are small gestures that feel huge when you put them in perspective. A 2-minute call just to say hello, a 1-line text asking if you made it home, a message saying, I saw this and thought of you. It doesn't take much, but it reveals everything. Because if he wasn't thinking about you, he wouldn't be moved to send it. Every unexpected check-in is like a little window into his thoughts, a signal that you've been living in his mind quietly, even when he's busy, even when he's surrounded by other things. That's the kind of detail you don't ignore, because it tells you he thinks about you more than you know. When a man starts including you in his everyday world, that's one of the strongest signs he thinks about you constantly, even when he's not saying it out loud. It might not always look like romance on the surface, but pay attention, because when someone brings you in the small details of their life, that's intimacy. Most people share the big things with anybody, successes, achievements, the highlight reel, but the small things, the ordinary pieces of the day, those get reserved for the people who truly matter. When he calls you just to vent about traffic, or when he tells you about some silly thing his coworker did, or when he asked your opinion on what shirt looks better for a meet-in, that's not random. That's him showing you that you are part of his world, that you are woven into the rhythm of his everyday life. It's easy to overlook because it doesn't always feel like a grand gesture. But think about it, if he didn't think about you, you wouldn't be the person he reached out to during the in-between moments. You wouldn't be the one he thought of when something funny happened in his day. You wouldn't be the one he wanted an opinion from on choices that don't directly affect you. The fact that he does share these things is proof that in his mind, you belong in his story. And when a man starts weaving you into his story, that's not casual. That means he sees you as more than just temporary. Sometimes it's as simple as him asking, what do you think I should eat? Or should I go with this option or that one? On the surface, those might feel like small, even silly questions, but they carry weight. They mean he values your voice enough to let it influence his decisions. That's trust. That's consideration. And more than that, it's a sign that when he's making choices, big or small, you're part of the equation in his mind. You're not just someone on the sidelines. You're a voice he wants to hear before he moves forward. It's also in how he shares his routines with you. Maybe he tells you about the gym. Maybe he complains about the long meetings. Maybe he fills you in on what he ate for lunch. That might not sound special until you realize he doesn't do that with just anybody. He's not calling his whole contact list to give the play-by-play of his day. He's doing it with you because he wants you close, even if physically you're not there. Sharing the mundane is a deeper kind of closeness, one that shows you're not just on his mind during the highs and lows, but during the everyday moments too. Another big sign is when he introduces you to his circle. If he starts talking about his family, his close friends, the people who matter most to him, and he brings your name up in those conversations or brings you around those people, that's him folding you into the bigger picture of his life. That's not something a man does lightly. It means you're in his thoughts enough that he sees you fitting into the spaces that matter most to him. When he tells his friends about something you said, or when his family knows who you are without even meeting them yet, that means You've been present in his conversations, which only happens because you've been present in his thoughts. And notice how he reacts when something happens to him, good or bad. If you're one of the first people he wants to tell, that's no accident. It means his instinct is to share with you, to bring you into his emotional world. Maybe he gets some good news at work and you're the first phone call. Maybe something frustrating happens and he texts you right away. That's not just habit, that's priority. That's him showing you that you hold space in his life, not as an outsider, but as someone whose presence helps carry the weight of whatever he's experiencing. This inclusion also shows up in how he makes plans. When a man is thinking about you, he doesn't just invite you to things after everything's already decided. He starts asking, what are you doing this weekend? Before he locks in his own plans. He'll check your schedule before finalizing his, because he's not just thinking about himself anymore, he's thinking about where you fit into the picture. Even small stuff like grocery shopping or running errands becomes a chance to include you. That's because in his mind, your presence makes the ordinary better. And it's not just about physical inclusion, it's about emotional access. He'll share his worries with you, the things that keep him up at night, the doubts he usually keeps to himself. He'll let you into spaces of vulnerability that he doesn't show the world. That's not surface-level interest. That's a man letting you see his real self because he thinks about you as someone who matters, someone who can hold those truths with care. When he shares his dreams, his goals, the things he hopes for in the future, and that's inclusion too. That means he's not just thinking about the present moment with you, he's thinking about how you might fit into what's ahead. Another layer to this is how naturally it happens. He doesn't have to make a big announcement about. Including you, he just does it. He starts sending you pictures of what he's doing. He brings you into his inside jokes. He keeps you updated without you asking. That effortless flow is a sign of how much space you take up in his head. It's not forced. It's not calculated. It's just what he does because you're part of his mental and emotional routine. So when a man includes you in his everyday world, don't underestimate what that means. It's more than casual sharing. It's proof that you're a thought in his head throughout the day, that he doesn't separate his life into me, you, but instead begins to merge the two. He thinks about you when he wakes up, when he goes through his day, when he reflects at night. You're not a guest in his life. You're becoming part of the fabric of it. And when that happens, it's one of the clearest signs that he's thinking about you much more than you even know. When a man finds ways to be near you even when he doesn't have to, that's one of the strongest indicators that you've been on his mind far more than you realize. People don't invest their time and energy into being around someone unless that person matters to them. Time is valuable, energy is valuable, and for him to carve out space just to be near you shows that you are not just a passing thought, you're someone he actively prioritizes. It might not always look obvious, it might not always be with grand gestures, but if you look closely, you'll see how he positions himself in your orbit, making sure he's close enough to connect, close enough to feel your presence, close enough to let you know he's there. Sometimes it shows up in the way he suddenly appears at the same events or gatherings you're at, even if it's not really his scene. He may not be a fan of a particular activity, but if he knows you'll be there, somehow he makes it a point to show up. That's not coincidence. That's intention. It could be a mutual friends get together or a casual outing you mentioned, and there he is, making sure he crosses paths with you. He doesn't need an excuse. He doesn't need to justify it, because the reason is simple. You're on his mind, and being near you feels worth the effort. Other times it's in the little adjustments he makes to his own schedule. Maybe he reroutes his commute so he can swing by where you work or where you hang out. Maybe he times things in a way that just happens to overlap with your plans. It may look casual on the surface, but underneath, that's strategy born out of thought. He wouldn't bend his day around yours unless you were a priority in his thoughts. Men don't go out of their way to create proximity unless there's genuine interest driving it. It can also show up in how often he's available. Even if he's got a lot going on, he makes time to be around you, no matter how small the window. He might not say outright, I moved things around to see you, but you'll notice how he makes himself present when it matters. He's not just waiting for a perfect opportunity. He's creating opportunities. And the truth is, people who don't think about you don't go out of their way for you. If he does, it's because you're consistently in his mind. Sometimes it's subtle, like him volunteering to help you with something he doesn't really have to. You mention you've got errands to run, and suddenly he offers to tag along. You casually bring up a problem you're dealing with, and he positions himself as the one who can help fix it. That's not just helpfulness. It's a way to be near you, to share time, to insert himself into your day in ways that keep you connected. That urge to show up, to be present, comes from a place of thought and care. Another sign is when he seeks out excuses to call or text you that eventually lead to spending time together. He might start with something light, asking about a recommendation, checking in on something small, and before you know it, he's suggesting to meet up. That's because the initial contact isn't really about the reason he gives. It's about finding a path that leads him closer to you. Men who think about you often will find ways to turn thoughts into actions, and those actions usually lead to proximity. Watch how he behaves in group settings too. If you're both in the same place, notice how he gravitates towards you. He may start out mingling, but somehow he ends up near your side, engaging in conversation, laughing at your jokes, or just being in your space. That's not an accident. Out of all the people in the room, he chooses your presence. He chooses closeness. That choice comes from thought, from you being on his mind enough to make him feel most comfortable and connected when he's near you. Even his body language can reveal it. He leans in when you talk. He positions himself so he's facing you. He lingers around instead of leaving quickly. These are quiet ways of saying, I want to be close. And he wouldn't want to be close unless he'd already been thinking about you. Proximity isn't just physical, it's emotional. And when a man keeps finding reasons to be near, it's because he feels drawn to that connection over and over again. Another layer to this is consistency. Anybody can show up once or twice by coincidence, but when you see a pattern of him being where you are, of him finding ways to make sure he gets to spend time with you, that's not luck. That's consistency born from genuine thought. He's not waiting for the world to bring him closer. He's making it happen because you're important enough to him that he can't just leave it to chance. It's also about how he responds when you need him. If you call and ask for something and he drops what he's doing to be there, that's more than just kindness. That's prioritization. That's him showing you through action that you're on his mind, that your presence matters enough to make him change his own plans. And even when you don't ask, sometimes he shows up anyway just to make sure you're good. That kind of initiative doesn't come from someone who's indifferent. It comes from someone who thinks about you more than they admit. And there's a kind of comfort he brings with his presence. You'll notice he doesn't need a big reason to be around. He just enjoys it. He'll run errands with you. He'll sit with you while you do something. He'll be there even if it's not exciting. That's because for him, being near you is the point. It's not about the activity, it's about the company. That speaks volumes because when you're a thought in someone's mind all day, simply being near you feels like enough. So when a man keeps finding ways to position himself close to you, even without needing an excuse, that's not just circumstance. That's intention wrapped in fixed subtlety. It's his way of acting on the fact that you occupy his thoughts. Every time he makes that choice, every time he rearranges his steps just to be in your presence, he's silently showing you that he thinks about you more often than you'll ever know. When a man supports your goals and encourages you in small but consistent ways, it's one of the clearest signs that you are on his mind more often than you realize. People don't put effort into building up someone they don't think about. They don't go out of their way to provide words of affirmation or motivation unless that person holds value in their heart. Support is a reflection of thought, and encouragement is a reflection of care. When he shows up to remind you that you're capable, when he drops little comments that keep you pushing forward, when he remembers what you told him about your dreams and circles back to check on your progress, that's not coincidence. That's him carrying your goals in his mind right alongside his own, because in his world, your success is something he's rooting for. It might not always be dramatic or over the top. A lot of times it comes in small, quiet ways. Maybe you mentioned a project you were nervous about, and the next morning you find a simple message from him saying, "You got this." Maybe you told him about your long-term dream, something you've been working towards slowly, and weeks later he casually asks, "How's that going?" That's not just small talk. That's him showing that he not only heard you, but held on to it, that your words stuck with him, and that your goals matter enough to take up space in his memory. That level of thought reveals more than you might notice in the moment. There's also something deeply telling in how he chooses to encourage you. Some men will show it by offering solutions, trying to help you strategize or brainstorm ways to make your vision easier. Others will simply remind you of your strength, telling you that you've already got what it takes. The approach may vary, but the heart behind it is the same. Encouragement doesn't happen without thought, and thought doesn't linger unless someone is on your mind. Consider how rare it is for people to remember the specifics of what others are striving for. Most people are caught up in their own ambitions, their own struggles, and they don't always have the bandwidth to keep track of someone else's journey. But when he does, when he reminds you of what you said you wanted months ago, that's proof that you've been on his mental radar long after the conversation ended. He's not only listening, he's investing energy in remembering because you're important to him. Sometimes support comes in the form of being present when you need it most. Maybe you've got an exam and he checks in the night before to wish you luck. Maybe you've got an interview and he makes sure to text afterward to ask how it went. Those gestures might feel small in the moment, but they are powerful in what they reveal. He had to think about you at just the right time to send those messages, which means you weren't just a passing thought. You were a priority in his mental landscape. It can also show up through action. Maybe he helps you prepare for something, listens to you practice, proofreads your work, or lends a hand with the practical side of what you're chasing. That kind of active involvement is support in its purest form. He's not just cheering from the sidelines, he's stepping into your world, letting you know that your goals aren't just yours, there's something he cares about too. People don't do that for someone they're indifferent about. They do it because they've been thinking about you and they want to contribute to your growth. Encouragement also shows up when things don't go as planned. If you stumble or face setbacks, pay attention to how he responds. If he reminds you not to give up, if he lifts you up when you're discouraged, if he reminds you of your worth when you doubt yourself, that's not just kindness, it's intentional thought. He didn't have to take the time to remind you of your strength, but he did because somewhere in his mind, he's invested in your journey. Your wins feel like his wins, and your struggles matter to him because you matter to him. Another way this support manifests is in how he celebrates your victories. It doesn't matter if they're big or small, he acknowledges them. If you finish a tough task, he's the one clapping for you. If you reach a milestone, he's congratulating you with genuine excitement. That excitement doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from him thinking about you, caring enough to pay attention, and being so tuned into your journey that your progress feels personal to him. There's a subtle consistency in how he does this. It's not just one-time encouragement, it's a pattern. Again, he shows up with reminders, check-ins, and affirmations. That consistency is proof of sustained thought. A random word of encouragement could come from anyone, but repeated encouragement, the kind that keeps showing up at just the right moments, comes from someone who has been thinking about you on a regular basis. What makes this so powerful is that support and encouragement are selfless acts. They require him to step outside of himself and put energy into you. For him to do that regularly means that you're not just occasionally crossing his mind, you're part of the rhythm of his thoughts. He's not only invested in his own growth, he's investing in yours, and that is one of the clearest signals that you are someone he thinks about more than you might ever guess. When a man prioritizes your happiness, even in subtle gestures, it speaks louder than any big declaration he could ever make, because it shows you've been running through his mind, even when he doesn't say it outright. Happiness is one of those things that can't be faked for long. If he's making choices, changing behaviors, or going out of his way to make sure you feel good, that's not a surface level thought. It's a sign that you've settled into his thoughts deeply enough that your smile, your comfort, your peace matter to him in a very real way. And the beauty of it is it often shows up in ways you might not notice at first, because it's not about being flashy, it's about being intentional. Sometimes it's as simple as him paying attention to what makes you light up and repeating it without you asking. Maybe you mentioned once that you love a certain snack, and he picks it up for you the next time he's at the store. Maybe he notices that you get cold easily and makes sure you have a jacket, or he adjusts the temperature in the car without making a big deal out of it. Those are tiny details, but they're powerful because they tell you he's not just thinking of himself, he's factoring you in. Your happiness is in his calculation, and that doesn't happen unless you're on his mind regularly. It can also show up in the way he tries to make you laugh when you're stressed. A man who thinks about you a lot will notice your moods, and when he senses you're not at your best, he'll step in, not because he has to, but because he wants to see you lighter. He might send a funny video, crack a joke, or distract you with a silly story just to shift your energy. That effort is rooted in thoughtfulness. He's not just letting you sit in your stress unnoticed. He's tuned in enough to want to lift you out of it. Another way it appears is in how he handles conflict. If a man doesn't think about you, he won't care how his words or actions affect you. But if he prioritizes your happiness, You'll see it in how he tries to de-escalate, how he takes responsibility, how he listens more than he talks. He may not be perfect, but his goal isn't to win the argument, it's to restore peace because your emotional well-being weighs on his heart. That effort is a clear sign that your happiness sits high on his list of priorities. Pay attention also to how he considers you in his plans. When he chooses restaurants, activities, or even small things like what movie to watch, notice if he leans toward what you'd enjoy. It doesn't mean he's abandoning himself. It means he's deliberately factoring in your joy because it matters to him that you're satisfied. That's not something a man does by accident. That's a choice made from consistent thought. He's not just thinking of what makes him happy. He's aligning with what makes you happy too. There's also something subtle in how he adapts to what you like without complaint. If he knows you prefer phone calls over texts, he'll start calling more. If he knows you're not a fan of loud places, he'll steer toward quieter spots. These adjustments might look small from the outside, but they're actually huge signals of thought and care. He's shaping parts of his behavior not because he has to, but because he wants to see you more at ease. That willingness to adjust is fueled by how much space you take up in his thoughts. You'll also notice it in how he shows up when you need support, not just in your goals, but in your emotions. If he senses you're tired, he'll offer to take something off your plate. If you've had a long day, he might suggest ordering your favorite food instead of asking you to cook or stressing you further. Those little things say, I've been thinking about how to make life easier for you. And for him to be that tuned in, you have to be in his mind more often than not. Sometimes prioritizing your happiness shows up in silence too. Maybe he lets you pick the playlist on the drive even though he has his own taste in music. Maybe he listens to you vent without trying to fix everything right away. Maybe he gives you space when you need it, even if he wants to be close, because he understands that your peace is more important in that moment. That's not indifference, that's deep thought about what will actually make you feel best. And then there's the way he celebrates you. A man who thinks about you consistently doesn't just wait for big occasions to honor you. He notices the small wins and finds ways to acknowledge them. He might say, I'm proud of you after you finish something that seemed ordinary to everyone else, or he might remind you how much you matter on a random day. Those affirmations aren't rehearsed. They're a reflection of the fact that he's been holding you in his thoughts and wanting to make sure you feel valued. Consistency is key here too. Anyone can buy flowers once. Anyone can give you a big gesture on a holiday. But the real proof that he prioritizes your happiness is when he's consistently weaving small acts of thoughtfulness into everyday life. That steady drip of care, that constant stream of gestures, both seen and unseen, tells you that you are not just a fleeting thought, you are a recurrent focus in his mind. When a man makes choices that keep your happiness at the forefront, whether it's through adjusting his habits, showing up in moments of need, or quietly making sure you're comfortable, he's revealing how much you occupy his inner world. Those subtle gestures, the ones that don't scream for attention, are the ones that carry the most weight because they prove that you're not an afterthought. You're someone he considers constantly, someone whose joy matters deeply to him, someone who he thinks about far more than you probably even realize.